Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We are back here on YouTube, and this week we're discussing how to minimize and fix arm paddling. This video coincides with last week's video talking about using hip rotation as opposed to torso rotation and how to stop faking rotation. Arm paddling is defined as us completing the motion solely using the shoulders, the elbows, and the wrists. Arms are hypermobile through motion, and their ability to complete the paddle stroke without the aid of any other joint is apparent as we go through those motions. There are a lot of downsides to arm paddling. One of the major ones is taking in the stress of taking competent paddle strokes and dividing that energy up amongst very small muscles and joints. This leads to overload of very small muscle groups that allow range of motion, like the rotator cuff, or looking at the tendons in the elbow that cause tendonitis for golfer's elbow and tennis elbow. Arm paddling ultimately shortens your career in paddling if you are pursuing racing. Inherently, as we're racing, we're trying to find more pressure and make your vessel go faster. And if we are only overloading very small muscle groups, they are more likely to be overused and injured, which will end most careers. Why is arm paddling so prevalent? We understand that we don't want to power our motion with the small joints. Why do they take over? It is most simple to complete a motion using only these small joints going back and forth. And it is much more complicated using larger joints to complete motion in a quick and concise way. Larger joints take longer to move. There's more nerve endings that have to be activated to allow them the opportunity to activate, versus with the arms, we use our arms all day, every day, and so these nerve endings firing is much more simplistic. All motion, any kind of dynamic motion, people who are inexperienced in it will just use their arm to try and complete the motion. It is only through training and optimization where we now use every joint that we have to our advantage to complete dynamic motion. So the way that we can stop this is by using our hips and connecting the lower body to the upper body. This allows the motion of our lower body to influence the pathing and movement of the upper body. Going through this motion, I can bring my hand across my body using only the shoulder, elbow, and wrist. This arm is now only powered by these small muscles. By putting this hand in a position and trying to lock and hold position, now the success of my legs and hips moving is pulling this arm across. This hand is now powered by my lower body coming back and forth. So the role changes. Instead of this arm going through motion, it is holding a position, and it is the lower body that is going through the motion. So looking at the canoe stroke, I can bring both of my hands down, and you can see that my torso and the rest of my body did not move, but I successfully went from the catch near the exit here, and the only thing that has moved is my hand. Now as I go through and use my hips to power the arms are holding a position, and getting to the end of the stroke is simply moving the hips and moving the legs. Same concept with the Surfski. As we go through, I can bring my arms through and get to the end of a stroke by only using my arms. Holding position, engaging the hips and the legs allows me to go through that hip motion and bring this paddle through the stroke. My arms are doing nothing except holding position and guiding the paddle, but they are not extending by themselves. And arm paddling, they are being guided and powered by the lower body. So one of the big things that we want to go over in conjunction with this ideology is identifying when you transition from using your whole body to using your arms throughout a stroke to dictate when the stroke ends. You do not want to have your blade in the water unless it is powered by the lower body, the hips, the shoulders rotating, downward pressure. All of these things are wonderful modes to connect with the water to move your vessel forward. If at any split second that your lower body is not engaged, removing the blade keeps you efficient. So what I mean by this is, as we go through the stroke, my hips are moving, my legs are moving, but there may be a time where these joints are either done moving or I have stopped moving them because of my orientation. But if I continue the stroke through the back here where my top hand goes down, I'm no longer moving my shoulders and my hips, so from the front half of the stroke, it's powered by the lower body. But now the back half is only powered by the arm. This is one of the downsides in pursuing a long stroke, is you have to make sure that you are engaging your full body from the beginning of the stroke to the middle of the stroke, all the way to the end of the stroke. Continuing to turn through the stroke makes the stroke effective behind you. But if I stop moving my hips when I square up here and my top hand comes down like so, I'm only powering that phase of the stroke with my arms. I am better off removing the blade sooner. When we look at long distance efficiency, it is tough to take a very short stroke. Our power comes from the length in the water. If we are subject only to half of that length in the water, we have to be very strong to make that effective. And those results are in a bubble. You may be strong and taking these upfront strokes and finding success within your bubble. But when you go out and meet somebody who has the same or more strength than you, and they also take a stroke twice as long, there's not much you can do to outmuscle that person. So going through a stroke, the moment that my hips stop moving would be the time that the blade should come out of the water. Ideally, we want to continue moving the hips more and more as we complete a full stroke to get that extra length in the water. But for whatever reason, if these hips and shoulders do stop moving, the hands stop getting powered, and it is time for that blade to come out of the water. You don't want to be subject to arm paddling late in the stroke because these joints stopped moving. Many coaching ideologies point to the catch of the blade going all the way into the water being the most important phase of the stroke. And from my point of view, the setup is the most important part of the stroke. Setup dictates all of your leverages and how you're setting up your hips and lower body to engage into the stroke. If we overshoot that concept and go right when the entire blade goes in the water without being meticulous about our setup, it means that we can get into a position where we are not able to use our hips and lower body effectively. So as we're going into it, we need to turn the hips, we need to load the leg, we need to create positive blade angle. All of this happens in the air. This is the setup. Once these joints are set up properly, now you have all these leverages to your advantage to complete a very competent stroke. If you do not prioritize the setup and think about the whole blade going in the water solely, there's a million different ways to stick the blade in the water, and most of them are incorrect. If my top arm is straight, if I don't turn my hips and I just go in, yes, I've submerged the whole blade, and yes, this is an important phase of the stroke, but I have no joints that are set up to my advantage for the rest of the movement. So now I'm limited to very inefficient movements to try and complete this stroke. And all of that efficiency comes from the hands are moving by themselves. We may be able to get some hip motion out of position, but if we set up properly, we put the hips and legs in a position that allow us to get the most out of the stroke, especially late into the stroke. And this concept is the same for the kayak. As we're going through, we need to set up very specific positions with our body before the blade enters into the water. Once we've set up all of these leverages, now as we go through the stroke, we can utilize these leverages as we're completing the stroke. The same ideology with the kayak. The moment the leg is done moving, the moment the hips are done moving, and the moment my arm has come across, this blade needs to come out of the water. If my blade stays in the water and I take a stroke that is too far back, now I am done moving all these big joints and my hand is powering the stroke by itself for a moment, which is slowing us down. Timing the motion from when the leg and the hip are done moving and the blade leaves the water. This timing is crucial to the success of your stroke. Arm paddling would be locking these joints in and going through. You can see I can start and end position without moving any of this. Now, as we do begin moving the lower body to complete the motion, we want to make sure the blade leaves when we are done with the motion. So there's two timings that we need to be aware of. Minimizing your arm paddling is synchronizing your lower body and your hip motion to the blade's position throughout the stroke. Excellent. I hope that has been informative. If you need additional resources, don't forget to check out the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com. We break down the body into different pieces. We break down the stroke into each of its phases, and we break down all those ideologies into different skill levels. This allows you the opportunity to focus on one aspect of either the body's motion or a phase of the stroke and match that with your overall skill level. As you begin to progress, some of the motions and ideas become more complicated. But in the beginning, we're just looking for broad general ideas, and the online school is geared to help with all skill levels. At-home training exercises, tactics for racing on the water, and some other miscellaneous skill sets, all that found on the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com. Thank you all so much for the support here on the YouTube channel. This cannot exist without you watching. So again, thank you all so much. So that's everything, and we'll see you next week with our next paddle tip.